So we'll wait for.
Do once the Facebook is live.
Yes, yes. Good afternoon, Namaste. I, Naina Jha, welcome you all to another episode of BI Dialogue. Bureaucrats India Dialogue series is India's most popular, objective, and unbiased dialogue dedicated to celebrate the stories of good governance and achievements of our bureaucracy, public sector undertakings, and corporate sector. Bureaucratsindia.in, a leading online portal, has redefined the idea of journalism in a very short span of time. Born in September 2020, Bureaucratsindia.in has become a popular platform for all those who cherish the stories of positivity, inclusivity, resilience, and excellence, our four-pillared commitment to partner with India's odyssey towards self-reliance. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Ms. Ira Singhal, IAS batch 2014. We welcome you, ma'am. Ms. Ira Singhal is the first person with disability to top the prestigious civil services examination. Before joining the civil services, she has worked with corporate sector as well. In her 6 years of career as an IAS officer, she has handled various positions like DC Keshavpuram Zone, DC Karol Bagh Zone, DC RP Cell and Parking in North Delhi Municipal Corporation, Joint Director, Department of Women and Child Development, Joint Director, Department of Social Welfare. Currently, she is serving as Deputy Commissioner, Revenues Department, Government of Delhi. Ms. Singhal is the brand ambassador for Department of Disability, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. She is also a brand ambassador for Ministry of Women and Child Development, Niti Aayog, and is on a national panel for Accessible Election Commission of India. Now, I request my colleague, Ms. Pragya Lal, to take this conversation further. Thank you. Pragya, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Thanks, Naina, for the nice introduction, and welcome you all to the yet another episode of Bureaucrats Dialogue, BI Dialogue. Okay, so welcome, ma'am. So having worked in different capacities as an IAS officer and also making a change in the lives of many marginalized communities, how do you look at your journey so far and the road ahead? Ma'am, you're on mute.
Ma'am, you're on mute.
I'm very, very grateful for the opportunities that I've had so far. I think I'm very lucky in that sense that, I got to be in a place where I could make a difference, where I could work on different sectors. And I know that a lot of people across the world want to be able to be in positions like this. So I know how lucky I am and how grateful I am for that, opportunity. And as far as road ahead, I think I've done, it's just the beginning right now. So there's so much more to do. There's so much more that India needs, in its journey to progress. So I think for me, the road ahead is full of a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential, and I hope I can make a difference. And I hope I can continue being a part of the growth story that we're starting.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Before joining the Indian Administrative Service, you were a part of the corporate world. What prompted you to join the steel frame of India?
So when I was in the corporate sector, there was this point where I was working 20-hour days and, it was actually 20 hours. And then I started thinking that if I can work so hard for the corporate, the kind of difference I can make if I do this for the government will be immense. No offense, and I absolutely loved working in the corporate sector. It was very, very interesting and enjoyable. But I always had this need that I needed to make a difference with my work. I needed my work to be something that, touched lives, that made lives better, and that really impacted the larger world. And that's how I decided to quit and get into the government and work for the country in this way. So, and this was something that I had thought about as a child, but I didn't really get into it because, sometimes you kind of leave those childhood ideas behind and you do what everybody else around you is doing. So that's how engineering, MBA, and corporate sector happened. But then I started feeling that I need to make a difference, and that emotional satisfaction bit was missing. And that's what brought me here. And that's why I decided to quit and give civil services.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. You are indeed making a change in so many lives. You are the brand ambassador for the Department of Disability, Union Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Union Ministry of Women and Child Development, and NITI Aayog. You are also on the panel of Accessible Election Commission of India. Please do share your experience so far.
I think with all of them, with Election Commission, we actually got to work on policies for elections for people with disability across the country. So we got to visit how things were being done and then kind of assess if more was needed. So that was very interesting. With the others, it's more about spreading awareness and discussing issues on different platforms and to really help make a change in people's mindsets. I do like the fact that I do get to talk about a lot of the policies and be a part of a lot of policy making. For example, I work a lot with the CBSE on their policies for children with disabilities, on exam policy, on curriculum, those kind of things. So being the brand ambassador, it's not really an official role as such, because you don't have a job as an officer with that. But what that does is that it gives you a larger voice, and I get to speak to audiences on those issues and on promotion of women, on empowerment of people with disabilities. So that's basically what I end up doing.
Yeah. You have always been very vocal about issues like education, disability, gender issues. What changes have you seen in the present scenario, and what are the challenges we are still facing?
In terms of changes, I think India has come a long way from when this millennia started itself. Leave aside the story of when India became independent, but even from the last 22 years, it's been a huge journey. The way women were perceived in society, the kind of opportunities that existed, the number of women that were allowed to access those opportunities, that is definitely grown. So there's a lot, that churning from just the metros. And in fact, at that point, it was a small few families of metros. From that, it has expanded down to tier 2 cities, and then slowly trickling down to semi-urban and, those areas of India. So I think that's a huge change. And as far as people with disabilities goes, we are still a little behind the rest of the world. But see, the one mindset is we had to start from a very, very low point. So if the world was at 0, we were at -20. So, we had that gap to cover as well. Because for us, it wasn't just about the infrastructure or the access. It was also about the mindset. And the biggest problem has always been the mindset of the parent of a child. Whether it is girl child or a child with disability, it's the parents themselves that refuse to believe in their kid's ability. It's the parents themselves who refused to think that their child could do something beyond what they thought, was possible, or what the world around them was telling them. When it comes to women, like I said, we've come quite a way. Of course, there's huge journey still to be traversed. There's a huge opportunity set that is still not available to girls. But there is still, the number of examples that we have today is a lot bigger. That set is a lot bigger. For example, in the 90s and the 80s, all IPS officers that you would talk about would be Miss Kiran Bedi, because she was the first one, and she was making the way all the changes, and she was bringing that mindset. But today, when you talk about IPS officers, females, it's a huge set. There's so many of them who've done brilliantly. Women have come into the army, women have come into, all sorts of positions. So we have that, that set is growing. The women that you can look up to, that set is growing. With people with disabilities, it's not as big. It's not that wide, it's not that large, it's not that deep. So there we still have a lot of gap. We still have a larger journey to traverse. And I see the problem starts with the access to basic education that has still not been solved. So all my children with disabilities still do not get to go to school. And they still don't have access to education in that respect, because we don't have an accessible infrastructure, we don't have accessible teaching methodologies. So that gap is still huge. But yes, we've come quite a way. At least today, schools want to admit a child with disability. Back when I was studying, and my disability wasn't something that hampered my participating in a regular classroom, but I was refused admission by a whole lot of schools simply because of my disability. They would say that put this child in a special school, despite the fact that I had no, I caused no burden to the classroom, I caused no burden to the teachers. But it's the mindset itself wherein they were like, oh, this child looks like that, so this child shouldn't be in our school. So that mindset has definitely gone away. Today, there are obviously schools that do refuse children, but it's not as large scale as it was back then. So back then, to find a school which would accept a child with disability, that itself was a huge problem. So I think we've come quite a way. And of course, there's still true equality has not been achieved.
Yeah, it's a lot has been done in this sector, but still a long way to go. In the erstwhile North MCD, you are credited with a unique project where a 12-hour crash cum daycare facility has been provided inside government schools. The project has been appreciated by PMO. Tell us more about this project.
So when I was working as an SDM in Delhi, I rescued around 335 child and bonded laborers from illegal, unauthorized industries, and doing work in those industrial areas. And that's when I started realizing that the problem, of child labor existed in large quantities. And it wasn't about child labor. It was actually linked to a larger problem. We also, stopped a lot of child marriages. I have personally seen children as young as 6 years taking drugs. And it's not hard drugs like that. It's like they'll smell a paint thinner and they'll, burn rubber and try to smell that. So it's just small, those kind of things. And you would see that happen very often around you. And what do you say to a child who's 6, right? How do you tell that child? You can't arrest a child who's 6. You can't really do much with a child who's 6. You can talk to their parents, but really, once you're gone, you really don't know what's going to happen to that child. So I felt really bad about that. I don't think we needed piecemeal solutions. So I started looking into the problem. And the one thing that I found was that, and there was also the issue of women dropping out of workforce. India was facing this huge crisis at that point. I remember in the early 2018 and 2019, this was a huge problem. I think one of our reports had come out which said that a lot of women are dropping out of workforce. And when you look at the larger picture, what you realize is that the reason that women in urban areas were dropping out of workforce was because there was no way for women to take care of their children as well as work. So their biggest problem always was that if I go to work, what happens to my child? And all of these kids that we were catching as, we were catching, working in these terrible conditions, and the children that we were rescuing, they were somewhere connected to the fact that when their mother went to work, the mother took them along because she had nowhere else to leave a child. In an urban area, the parents have migrated from a rural environment, right? So they don't have nani, chachi, dadi, bua, mausi to take care of the child when the mother goes to work. So there is really nobody to look after the child. If the mother sends the child to Anganwadi or to school, that's for a few hours. The mother is at work for 8 hours and she has to travel 2 hours on both sides. So really, it's 12 hours that she's away from home. And how does she, who takes care of a child when she's there? And that's why we were seeing all these cases of children being abused, because most of the child abuse happens when the parents aren't around. The parents are at work and the children, are left alone. And the children get abused. The children go as child labor, because if the mother doesn't want to leave them home, she has to take them to work. And slowly, when the child is 7, 8, she'll tell him, okay, you pick up this, okay, you do this small thing. And then, it becomes like, if the child is doing something, they might as well get paid for it. So the child becomes child labor. And, the child marriage is happening because the girls could not go to school and the parents don't want to leave them alone. So let's, marry the girl off so that she's protected, or, the marriage thing is saved. So, so that's how I came up with this project, wherein I thought that let's have 12-hour daycares and creches, wherein from 6 months to 12 years, the mother can leave her child at a safe place. Now, remember, in Delhi sort of scenario, we have a rule that the school has to be within 8 kilometers. But that doesn't mean that the workplace of the parent is 8 kilometers, right? So when the school finishes, for the mother to take the child to the creche, it's impossible. Who's going to come back from work, drop the child to the daycare, and then go to work? That's never going to happen. So what we decided was that this was completely my brainchild, and I love to take credit for this one because I'm very happy that we could pull this off. So I decided that we should have this in the school, because then I just have to take the child from the classroom to the creche room. And we also had a huge problem of a huge dropout, dropout of children missing from schools, children not attending schools, children having very low educational standards and nutritional standards. So if we have the child with us from the age of 6 months to 12 years, it's very easy to shift the child from the creche room to the classroom at the appropriate age. If the child is with me for that long, I can take care of the child's nutrition. I can take care of the child's education. I can give, curricular training to the children. So I can really work on the holistic development of the child. And of course, all our medical interventions as well, which is all their shots in time, all of that, we can take care of that. And the mother can go to work completely free, completely, without worrying about what is happening to my kid. And these schools are generally, we did it in the municipal schools, because municipal schools are generally right within the areas where such parents live. Municipal schools are always within these, low income localities. So the mother has easy access to these schools. And plus, if you have multiple children, you can drop all of them at the same location and go to work. You don't have to drop one child to a creche and then the other child to the school, and in the evening come back and pick them from different locations. So it's a single location, long duration, this thing. She can come at any time and take the child when she gets free. So that way we solved all of these issues at this one project. And I thought that in a social return sort of way, the amount of money and effort that we're putting in will give us much larger returns, because we're able to save these children in all of these issues, right? We can save them from child labor, we save them from child abuse, we save them from being dropouts to school, we improve their educational, nutritional, medical standards. We kind of holistically develop the child in everything. So we ensure that women stay in workforce. So that was the idea behind the project, and that's how I got CSR funding for it, and that's how we got it started.
Okay, that's incredible. Actually, this project has been beneficial for the children as well as the mothers. That is very incredible, ma'am. Let us now talk about our bureaucracy. How inclusive our bureaucracy today?
To be honest, I think until the point that we got the reservation, the 4% reservation, there wouldn't be any people with disabilities in the bureaucracy if that didn't exist. Because for a person with disability, life is already very tough, and to compete in competitive exams is without the benefit of the reservation, it's almost impossible. Because the access to school itself. So I'll give you an example. A child with disability, if it's an ortho disability, it takes longer for that child to do everything, which includes getting ready for school, getting ready to go to exams. Everything in life it takes longer for that child. Just a lot of times your books are so heavy. I remember my books were so heavy that I couldn't move the book around. I would move myself around the book to get into comfortable positions to study. So those little things become very tough for a child with disability. And even reaching the school is such a problem. If you're a child with visual disability, you have to read through Braille, and not every book is available in Braille. So, the access to education becomes very restricted for children with disability. And when it comes to government sector, in bureaucracy, you get in because of your education. So people with disabilities were at a huge disadvantage. If you're a child with hearing disability or with multiple disabilities, imagine the world is much, much tougher, because our schools are not equipped to teach children in sign language. So the world was very limited for people with disabilities, and having this reservation has really opened up. But you see, still a lot of this posts with reservation are unfilled. We don't have people with disabilities in every sector, in every kind of job. So that's still not as inclusive. And still that discrimination exists. Still, a lot of times when people join a service, they are not treated as equals. That thing always exists at the back of everybody's mind. People may not be outright unkind, but there are subtle issues that come up. And I'll give you an example. This year, out of the 7 candidates with orthopedic disability that were selected in the civil services exam, only 3 have been allowed to join. 4 candidates out of 7 have been rejected basis their disability, because no service is ready to take them on their panel. And these are people who have cleared civil services exam. And then again, the services are saying, we don't want you. We don't think you can do our work, which is so unfair and which is so unjust and so discriminatory, right? So I don't think it's really inclusive to that extent, because you're rejecting 4 out of 7 tells you that there is a problem. We are accepting only people with a specific kind of disability and not the others. So why should it matter what your disability is? The only thing that matters is, can you do that job? So people are not really going by that. People are still deciding to, the mindset is still how not to take a person with disability, instead of how do we accommodate and make sure that the person with disability can do their job well and can be a part of our system as well as everybody else. So it's still that negative mindset of how do we exclude these people. That mandate exists, oh my God, we have to take them. But let's make it so strict and so restrictive that only those easiest types would come in and the rest won't. So it's still a negative mindset from what I see, and it's still a negative way of accepting people. So I think we're still a long way to go.
Yeah, but I'm sure people like you out there, we slowly and steadily
we will. Yes, absolutely.
Will see some changes in the
yes.
Empowerment of masses through inclusion is now central to the idea of good governance. What is your take, ma'am?
I absolutely agree with that, because till you are empowered as citizens, you will not be able to expect the correct things from your government. Even to make your government accountable, your government to really work for you and not for itself, you need to be aware as a citizen. And you can only be aware if you are empowered. For example, till a few people with disability got into those positions by their own merit, the others could not get in because nobody was thinking about it. Nobody was thinking about how do we include everybody, right? So empowerment and I think the citizens themselves realizing their power is a huge step of improving governance. I will not be able to help you if you don't tell me how you need me to help you. And you will not know how you need me to help you till you are, or at least be able to ask me for it, till you are truly empowered. People are still scared of coming to our offices and of coming and talking to us. And I think that's really a sad state of affairs, because we are not sitting in our offices to to reject people or to act as ivory towers. We are literally sitting there to make people's lives better, but very few people actually are empowered enough to talk to us or to come meet us directly. So I think unless people are empowered, we will not be a developed society. Because unless people are empowered enough to really be a part of governance, the government will not be able to serve them. Till I know how you want me to serve you, you won't really get service. When I go to colleges, for example, I always do a Q&A session rather than a lecture, because if students don't ask me questions, then they don't take away what the only thing they will take away is what I want them to know. So if citizens don't ask the government for things, or help, or ask the government questions, the government will keep giving what government wants to give. People will never get what they need. So I think it's the same logic. So I truly believe that it is important for an empowered citizenry for good governance.
Yeah, and for this, awareness and education is a must.
Absolutely.
In his last Mann Ki Baat, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced to introduce sign language as a subject in the curriculum. You have been working on this for a long time. How do you look at the potential of Indian Sign Language?
I think currently Indian Sign Language is very restricted. It does not have words to express all sort of ideas and emotions. And I know the comparison between American Sign Language and Indian Sign Language, and Indian Sign Language is still very, very underdeveloped. And the reason is it's because it's not widespread. But the minute it becomes widespread, it will become a lot more developed, and it will become something which, so the potential is huge. For example, if you think about it, currently, I feel really, really bad when it comes to sign language and its development in India. What has been happening over the years is that sign language is only taught to children who have hearing disability. And in majority of the cases, we still try to get them to do lip reading. While I understand that becomes easier, but what is the point of a language? The point of a language is that you are able to communicate with everybody else, right? But currently, children with hearing disabilities can only communicate with other children with hearing disabilities. They can't even communicate with their own families. They don't have a connection with their parents, with their siblings, because the rest of them don't know sign language. So if this child knows sign language, the only people he talks to is the ones in his classroom, which is always a smaller number. And that restricts their true assimilation in society. Their true, growth potential never gets developed, because you can't speak to everybody else. That language is for others like you. It's really not serving the purpose that the language is supposed to serve. And that's what I think the whole problem is, that with sign language, we haven't really made it a language. We've just made it this small little dialect that is spoken by this really, really small set of people, which actually works to exclude them further. Because, if they are the only people who know it, then they are the only people who are their own society. So we're kind of excluding them from the rest of the society. So I, back in 2020, actually had put sign language as a compulsory third language in all of my schools in North NCT when I was the director of education. So I thought that it's vital that all my kids are able to speak it, and all my teachers are able to speak it, because unless we have that, we won't. Kids with hearing disabilities will always be a they rather than a part of us. So I think it's ISL is not as developed, but the minute it becomes a part of our regular curriculums and everybody else also learns it, it becomes so much easier. Even think about it, when you're in bed, sometimes you have you're intubated and you have that whole tube and everything, and you can't breathe. A lot of people in COVID had that, right? At that point, you need to be able to tell people if you're thirsty, if you're hungry, if you need to do something, if you're uncomfortable. Imagine knowing sign language at that point, and the other person also able to understand you. Or sometimes if you're in a crowd and you can't talk and you want to signal your friend, you're in a concert or a big loud event and you want to speak to your friend, or you're in trouble and you want to signal somebody, wouldn't sign language be so much more necessary at that point? So I think it's vital that we develop it, and it's not yet developed. But hopefully, now that our Prime Minister is himself that actively involved in it, it will get that traction that it needed.
Yeah. Your current assignment is quite challenging. Collection of revenue, addressing gaps, and the task is indeed daunting. How has your experience been so far?
To be honest, this is my slightly lighter assignment compared to my other assignments before. Earlier, I was, so when I was in North MCT, at a point, I was handling 2 zones as a deputy commissioner, and I was handling 5 headquarter charges. So after that, I was in social welfare and WCD department. So this is my slightly lighter charges compared to everybody else, all my other assignments. But it's still a very interesting one because I work on a lot of policy issues. It's less people public meetings assignment, more of a policy assignment, and I think that's very interesting. I mean, that way it's a little like you get to work on really larger level issues. So I'm also the nodal officer for the environment issues when it comes to districts of Delhi and things like that. But to be honest, it's slightly actually on the easier end of things rather than the more complicated end of things, as I'm used to.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. While we have already talked about the social stigma, but still I want to know from you, last but not the least, do you think that social stigma attached with certain conditions draws more trauma than they actually are? How can we make our society realize that importance of all, irrespective of their social, economic, and physical condition?
I think the one thing that people will need is good examples. So, a lot of times when you think of it's very tough for the world to think of something for the first time. So if there is, a first time that you see someone else doing, it becomes easier. And you are completely right that social stigma actually is the bigger problem. Because I believe that it all starts with the way you want to look at yourself. And a lot of times your self-image is dependent on what other people tell you should look at yourself like, right? So for example, a girl who's born doesn't know that she's a girl. She doesn't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But as she grows up, the society kind of conditions her to believe that being a girl makes her a certain way, makes her lesser in certain things or better in certain things. I mean, that depends on the family and the situation. But the social conditioning defines how you think of yourself and how you behave with the world. Similarly, for people with disabilities, at least, it's the social conditioning, it's the world around them that tells them that you should be ashamed of your disability. That's the first thing that happens, that there is something wrong with you and you need to be ashamed of being who you are or the way you are. And after that, slowly, the other parts start in. Your self-image goes. If your self-image goes, then what that does is that actually leads you to not really be empowered enough to really develop yourself in to your true potential. So that again affects the way your assimilation into society. So I absolutely agree with you that social stigma really kind of restricts a person from being developed in what they could have developed themselves as. And it's important for society to really see people as beings of potential. And that's where I think having role models and examples of something makes a huge difference. So if I, as a girl in a small town, know that a Didi in my neighborhood has done this, it's easy for me to go and tell my parents, see, that Didi did it, so you should let me also, and I can also do it. As similarly, as a child with disability, if you see someone who looks like you or someone who has the same disabilities as you, go out and make a difference in the world, you will start believing that maybe you can too. And your parents themselves will start believing that maybe you can too. So I think those little role models, and they don't have to be big, higher level role models. A lot of times it's the smaller level role models, the ones within your own little community, that make a huge difference. So I always say this to all the girls who get an opportunity and who come out and make something of themselves, that you are going to be that role model for so many other girls to look up and convince their parents to give them a chance as well. So, I know this for a fact that if you go to a school and you tell kids that, go ahead, become a NASA scientist, most of the times they start thinking, oh, that person did it because they had a different environment than us. They had a different upbringing than us. They lived in a different world than us. But if you give them an example, which is of someone from their background, their school, their little community, the chances of that making an impact on them is huge. So I think little role models everywhere will make a huge gap, and that's the only way you can change the mindset and change the society around us. Because unless you show people that it can be done, they won't believe it. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful, ma'am. It was an inspiring and insightful information, and definitely the mantra is believe in yourself, irrespective of your condition, your background, anything. So thank you, ma'am, for being with us. It was such a delight talking to you. Friends, it was Ira Singhal, IAS and Deputy Commissioner, Revenue Department, Government of Delhi. Bureaucrats India is immensely grateful to her for sparing time to be with us. You please do follow Bureaucrats India Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And do not forget to log into bureaucrats.in for great stories of good governance and many more. I would like to thank the audience for joining today, BI Dialogue and our team for their valuable support. Thank you once again, ma'am. Namaskar.